Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you all?
Great.
Good. A little mixed reviews there, but okay. If you're like I am, you may have kind of come meandering in this morning, but hopefully by the end of the service you will be filled with God's love and light and go forth and brace for another day, another week, another month. My sermon today is based on the book Becoming a Spiritualist by Hugh Gordon Burroughs. It's pretty much a classic in spiritualism. There is a lot of wonderful truth in there, a lot of positive thought. So, I have to tell you, I'm starting off with his chapter called Excess Baggage. But before that, I want to tell you a little bit about a guilty problem I have, and I know some of you also share that. Can't seem to clear the place of clutter. You know, it doesn't matter if it's our purse. Many of us will dump our purse once a week and think, how did all this stuff get in here? And it feels so good to have it down to the basics and know where every single item is when we need it. And by the end of the week, it's crammed to overflowing again. Guys don't usually have that problem with their pockets, and often it's because they let their friend, female friend with the purse, carry all the excess. But at any rate, vehicles. Some vehicles, people keep them immaculate inside. Other people, just everything in the world gets thrown there. And you think, well, you know, one of these days I'll clean it out. And meantime, one of these days never seems to come. Well, I am a pack rat. I have been for many, many years. I'm not proud of it. I'm not quite to the hoarder yet. And every now and then I watch one of those shows just to remind me I don't want to be. But some of you know my mother has been ill, and we've had to move her several times in the last 5 years. And this is no exception. Now we have all of her furniture in our house, which wouldn't be bad if we had moved all of our furniture out first. But I was wondering, Reverend Marilyn Autry came to our home this morning, and then we drove from there. I was upstairs still doing the last minute lady things, and I thought, there's the doorbell. Where on earth can she sit? And that's serious if every surface is covered. So I'm working on that. I truly, truly am. And I keep telling our sons, I'm not going to do this to you. I promise I'm not going to do this to you. Easier said than done. But some of us, really have clutter around and stuff. And it takes usually some sort of a life event to wake us up and recognize that we may be bogged down with things that aren't even that important to us. They were at once upon a time, but now, do we even notice them? Do they bring us joy? Do they bring us upliftment every time we see them, or do we even see them anymore? So this is the clutter we have here in the physical world and around us, but primarily this morning I want to talk with you about the clutter, the excess baggage that we have a tendency to carry around with us mentally. You know, we say, when we go to Spirit, we leave it all behind. And we do all the physical stuff. We don't take our car, we don't take our clothes, we don't take our precious jewelry. We don't take any of the material, physical things with us when we go to Spirit. However, we do take our personality. We do take our mental attitude. We take our mental habits. Now, as we go through some of these things, I'm going to ask you, focus on yourself. Don't think, oh, that sounds just like so-and-so. I know who she's talking about. Don't think about someone in your family. Don't think about someone in your circle of friends. Simply go within and think about yourself. What about your travel and your preparation for your spiritual home? Now, if you travel here in the physical world, you'll know that airlines have all kinds of baggage rules now. You get charged a hefty fee if you go over their weight allowance. And there's all kinds of things that you cannot take now if you're flying somewhere. And what you are allowed to take often has to be in a tiny container in a clear plastic bag. But what about going to the world of spirit? We're going to have our etheric body, and we're going to have our own understanding and awareness. So what are we going to lug with us? Well, worry. Oh my goodness, how much we worry. And does it do a bit of good to worry? Of course not. Of course not. We worry about things that have happened. Can't undo it. Let it go. We worry about things that could happen. Well, if you were here for the healing service, you would have heard the Reverend Marilyn Autry say, what we think about is what we create. Now, as spiritualists, we know that. We know that. Thoughts are things. But how easy is it to fall into that negativity, to become susceptible to the worry about everything? About everything. And think what that does to us every night if you go to bed worrying about something and then you wake up and that's the first thing on your mind and you're lugging that around with you all day and then you take it back to bed with you at night and chances are you don't sleep all that well. Why do we do this? It becomes a habit. As many of these things, it becomes a bad habit. And sometimes just by hearing about it again or reading about it, we realize, whoops, yes, I have kind of gotten back into that rut. And it's time to change my attitude. Then there's gossip. Oh my gosh, we see this in so many magazines, we see this in so many shows, television shows, especially about celebrities and so forth. And that too can become a habit within ourselves. Now, have you noticed gossip is almost never positive? It's usually about someone else. If it was us, we'd be saying fact. But when it's about someone else, it's hearsay. And it's so easy to get caught up in the negativity of that and being judgmental. And why do we do that? Could it be that if we're putting down someone else, maybe it makes us feel a little better about ourselves? It's a very slippery slope. Very slippery. And again, it seems to be all around us, and it's easy to get pulled into that. It's very important to pay attention to the people around you. Your family, we can't always do everything about our family, and we can't usually do anything about fellow workers or employees. What about ourselves? What about if we just focus on ourselves? We can't do it for everybody else. We really can't do it for anybody else, just ourselves. Is it easier to do it or think somebody else should be making these changes? Well, yeah. That means I don't have to do the work. I can just sit back and observe and offer my opinion. Going within, facing the real truth, that's kind of scary. Because once I do that, chances are then I know that I need to change. And change can be scary too. Criticism. Are we so perfect and superior that we can criticize anyone and everyone because, well, frankly, we know best? We talk about bullying today in schools. It's become a huge issue. Adults can bully too. And if someone is super sensitive, they react very strongly to someone criticizing them. But is that not also a negative quality? If someone is very super sensitive, doesn't that bring in the ego? Unable to see outside of self. I'm one of those people that used to be upset if I walked into a store and two people were talking in another language, especially if they glanced over at me. Well, first of all, why would I assume that they're talking about me? Is that ego? I mean, really? If I were in their country and I didn't know their language and I was there with another friend, of course I would be speaking English. And would they judge me? Well, how rude. They're in this country. Why aren't they speaking Italian or Spanish or Chinese or whatever? I have great respect for people who speak more than one language. I think that's phenomenal. And I wish I had started it sooner, at a younger age. But we rush to judgment. We become too sensitive. And that's our ego at work. What right do we have to assume that we are the center of everyone else's world? It's okay to go within. It's okay to have these talks, not only with our true self, but in our prayers, in our meditation. We see and hear a lot of things about other people, celebrities, friends, co-workers. Could we just be like that duck and let it roll? Or, even better, if someone starts sharing gossip with us, could we not say, that's really dragging me down. Let's change subjects, or let's try to be more positive. Again, it's a slippery slope. It's so easy to fall into these bad habits. We worry about things and we fear things, and in my opinion, that may be one of the reasons we keep pushing away. We don't want to think about what's going on within. We want to keep putting the focus on other people and their problems or other situations, because we can think it, we can say it, and then we can step back and feel superior. Doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way in this world, which is God's world. There was a traveler known as the Plague, and met another traveler. The second traveler said, "Where are you going?" And the Plague said, "I'm going to kill 50,000 people." Several weeks later, the travelers met again. And again, the second traveler said, "I thought you said you were going to kill 50,000 people, but I heard 100,000 died." The Plague said, "I did kill 50,000 people. The others killed themselves with fear and worry." Again, that's from Hugh Gordon Burroughs. We have choices. And that's the one thing spiritualism reminds us over and over again. We do have choices. Are we going to make ourselves sick with worry, with fear? We can do that. I mean, medicine tells us what stress can do to the human body. I know you're thinking, I want to talk. See, I told you, don't think about others around you. Think about yourself. We have stress in our life. We do. There's no question. And we think, oh, nowadays we're just so inundated with stress. What makes us think we're special? What makes us think that generations before us didn't have stress? We are lucky. And I do recognize that some of our newfangled contraptions that are supposed to make our lives easier have in fact just made us take on more and more because we think, oh, I can do that. But this is a generational thing. It's a human condition. We can make stress for ourselves without being aware. And it all goes back to our communicating with the infinite, with our Creator. We say all the time that prayer is talking to God. When do we meditate? When do we listen? Some people do get wonderful information through their dreams. That's a whole lot better than nothing. But do they take time to meditate and let it come into their waking recognition, their waking awareness? People think, well, I talk and talk and talk to God, but God never talks back. Well, we have to listen, you know. A telephone receiver has two things on it. One is to talk into, and the other is to listen. But we sometimes forget that. So we know the heavy burdens we want to avoid. They're very common. But you know, our mental baggage can be so light and so easy. It's not a burden, it's a gift if we cultivate constructive thinking. And notice I use the word cultivate because it doesn't just happen. It doesn't. We have to constructively think about, okay, what's going on? What can I do about it? How can I make this a positive thing? You know, nobody likes the hard lessons. Nobody likes those. We all want happy, good lessons, but do we remember the happy, good lessons? No, we usually remember the real challenges and what we learned from it. And we do learn from it ideally. So we want to think constructively. I must tell you, for many years, people would come into this church and they'd say, I don't like this and this and this and this, and I'd say, well, join the church, and what are you going to do about it? Don't give me the negativity unless you have some constructive suggestions. And don't we do that all the way from the highest government in the world down to the tiniest detail in our lives? Could we start changing our attitude? Could we start being positive and constructive about, well, I can only do this right now, but I will make it a point. Tomorrow, I'm going to do more. And the day after, I'm going to do more. What about love? What about love? You know, we have this perception that love is this romantic, erotic emotion. You don't love any two people the same. None of us do. We love people in different ways. The important thing is to love, to understand that we are all God's children. And we may not like someone's actions, but we can understand that's apparently where they are on their life path, and we can still love them as a child of God. And we can set the example. You know, parents, well, do as I say, not as I do. Kids don't buy that, and neither should we. We need to set the example, especially as spiritualists, because unfortunately a lot of people don't know about this beautiful religion. And when they say to you, wow, I'm sorry you're going through such a hard time, but you're doing it with such grace. What is your secret? Tell them. Share it with them. We all need to know that God isn't on a throne up in the clouds. God is all around us. God is within us. If you have love for others, then it's easy to have sympathy, compassion, and understanding. Finding that unconditional love within yourself is the key, because we receive it from God all the time. And we all have that spark of God within. We just need to not only be aware of it, but to consciously cultivate it. Lastly, understanding natural laws, which are God's laws. A textbook of everything in life is River of Life by the Reverend Marilyn Autry. People who read that book come back and say, oh my gosh, this is life-changing. Now I understand so much of what has occurred in my life. And now I feel like, okay, now I get it. Now I can start being more aware. It's a wonderful book. It is life-changing. When we walk with awareness of God's laws, it quickly becomes very apparent to us. We never, ever walk alone.